Parliament's Home Affairs Portfolio Committee is concerned that cuts in the IEC's budget may hamper efforts to hold free and fair elections come 2024. The committee says this move should be reconsidered to ensure democratic processes in the country are not undermined. The IEC's budget will be slashed by nearly 800 million rand over the next 3 years. It has 2.2 billion rand, around 278 million rand less than initially budgeted for in the current financial year. Well, let's speak more about this now with the member of that Home Affairs Portfolio Committee, Mr. Brandon Pillay. Mr. Pillay, good afternoon. How concerned are you? How worried are you about these cuts?
Very good afternoon, and thank you very much, and good afternoon to all your listeners. I think it's a serious concern, in particular if one has to look at the last local government elections and the voter turnout and the need for voter education. Now, one of the biggest concerns we have is that there hasn't been enough in terms of awareness and education. And if one cuts on the budgets, it means that the IEC is not going to be able to provide that very important education and awareness on elections.
What other impact could there be? I mean, yeah, it's quite a big amount, 800 million rand down over the next 3 years. What other impact do you anticipate besides voter education, for example?
So there are currently around 26 million registered voters in South Africa from a group of about 40 million eligible voters. So there's actually a need to capture at least 13 million voters to register and to vote. And for this to happen, IEC is going to require much funding in order to hire democracy education field workers. Now, the other thing is that the voter registration weekend, we used to normally have 2 weekends, is going to be cut down to 1 weekend. And this means that you may not be able to reach the target of having to register more eligible voters.
Yeah, so it's going to affect voter education, it's going to affect the registration process, and one would guess also the much needed communication plans of the IEC that in the past they've done so well might be affected. Could it also affect the delivery of the election itself?
To a large extent, I don't think that it can affect the delivery of an election because, I mean, we saw that even with a lower voter turnout, democracy still prevails and that you still are going to have an election. So irrespective of whether there is that or not, it's not going to affect the outcome of it. But I think to enhance democracy and to be able to get a bigger democratic process or a stronger democratic process, the more people, the more democratic an election becomes. And I think it's important that one has to focus on getting the most in terms of voter turnout.
Now, if the IEC is receiving the slash budgets by nearly 800 million rand over the next 3 years, what are they telling Parliament? How are they planning to address some of those concerns that you as a portfolio committee are expressing?
So I think the IEC has not had an opportunity to have that input yet. However, one of the important things that we need to look at is to really look at the budget cuts that's imposed on them, and I think they're going to have to do that. And we're also going to then, perhaps they would need to collaborate with other government departments, particularly when it comes around education and awareness, how you partner with other government departments that provides public participation, public education, both at a municipal level, provincial and national level. There are different departments that undertake for those kind of things. So that's where you could get awareness. But then also the drive that the Department of Home Affairs does in terms of IDs and how they can then partner with them to be able to provide an added service in terms of voter education and registration.
Accessibility might become an issue if you think of the KwaZulu-Natal floods and the problems of accessibility that have come up with the destroyed infrastructure. Just as an example, as we head towards 2024, I mean, some of that infrastructure is going to take quite longer to repair and fully refurbish it and get it back to what it used to be. Would you, as a portfolio committee, I mean, as part of expressing your concern, encourage the IEC and government to embrace technology more and more and factor in the digitalization strategy into our elections come 2024? Or you think South Africa is not ready for that?
Well, I think we absolutely have to embrace. And if you look at the fourth IR, it's important for us to already start planning ahead. And I think we've seen with COVID and lockdown how we've been able to adapt to the new normal and to different means of technology. I mean, this interview in itself, normally eNCA would do an interview either in studio or you would come out to wherever we are and interview us. And right now I'm doing this interview via Zoom from Durban. So it means that we've adapted to different types of technologies and different methods and different means. And I think it's important. The discussion has already been held. A portfolio committee has raised this in terms of how we looked at different options. I don't think that we'll be ready for 2024, but we can start the process of looking at different methods and alternative methods.
Yeah, I mean, especially if maybe you could encourage them. I don't know how you engage with the IEC, Mr. Pillay, as MPs, but maybe you could encourage them to maybe segment their target audience to the younger ones, the upcoming, the young South Africans who might be voting for the first time or second time, for the 2024 election is going to be a historic one because it will be 30 years since the dawn of democracy in South Africa. Perhaps you could, because that will come with some cost savings.
No, absolutely. I have to agree with you. I have to agree that we have to embrace that. And I agree that we would, as the portfolio committee, ensure that this discussion is taken forward and moves full steam ahead. But I must also say that in terms of accessibility, we will also ensure, just like how the Department of Home Affairs have gone out into these areas with mobile units to be able to provide ID documents, we would also, ensure that at some level there would be this service provided to those areas where there are issues of accessibility.
Thank you very much for your time this afternoon on Today on eNCA. Mr. Brandon Pillay, a member of the Home Affairs Portfolio Committee, the South African Parliament.